Hey everyone, and welcome to week 5. I am going to do it pre-recorded just because we had something come up that meant it was just going to be hard to try and navigate another time. So please, yeah, bear with that this is recording. But I know a lot of you were going to be watching it on replay anyways, so thank you for your grace and patience. So let's dive in. Today we are talking about advocacy and how we can champion ND culture and safety. So ND is just another way of saying neurodivergent. You'll see a lot in this because it was getting really hard to type it all out and it don't be too much. So ND equals neurodivergent. And we're going to just dive really straight in and how we can be advocates, how we can champion advocacy, how we can create a culture in our setting that is one that is neurodivergent, inclusive and feels safe for neurodivergent brains. So, first, what advocacy actually is. Advocacy is using your influence to remove barriers and protect dignity. It is a time where you can stand up for something. Advocacy isn't just for neurodivergence, it's for all things, right? We are advocates for lots of different things. And it's important to think about it in a work context that it is a culture, not a rescue. We aren't here to, yes, part of it might be rescuing people, depending on what we're doing and talking about. But for when it comes to neurodivergent advocacy, we are talking about building a culture where people can feel safe and secure and, kind of belonging, not necessarily trying to rescue people. Now, there might be situations where you do need to step in and quote unquote rescue people, but overall, advocacy is creating a culture, not rescuing. And if you find yourself constantly rescuing people, maybe look at how that's actually working. As always, we come to this topic with curiosity over judgment, understanding over fixing, support over labeling, belonging over fitting in. We have confidentiality here. We're not here to diagnose anyone, and participation is always optional, but always encouraged. So, what is psychological safety? Now, this might be really weird to talk about, but let's define it very simply. A team is psychologically safe when people can ask questions, admit mistakes, request support, and disagree respectfully without fear of shame or punishment. This is a big thing, right? We are all probably aiming for this, no matter our team makeup. For neurodivergent teammates, psychological safety often looks like permission to ask for clarity. It can be opportunity for kind of setting those team norms, having multiple ways to contribute, and being able to feedback that is kind of clear and kind, especially knowing what their brain has already gone through. So we want to think about, you know, that kind of idea of a neurodivergent person already doesn't feel safe sometimes, most times. Their nervous system is on edge. Even if there is no threat actually at them, they will always feel that. I remember someone saying to me once that they know that there is no bear, but they feel like their body feels like there's always a bear ready to attack them, even though they live in the middle of a city and there is no bear ever there. So that idea of a nervous system feels on edge. And so when we can create this, when we can create a place where neurodivergent ND staff have that permission to ask clarity, that predictable meeting norms, multiple ways to contribute, there's no mocking, no sarcasm, or banter that harms people. I'm not saying there can't be any banter, but I'm just saying that could be offensive. Particularly thinking about when we say someone's like slow. Someone asked me, I just want to clarify the word retarded is no longer used. That is not appropriate. That is really not acceptable. So saying things like that, clear expectations and follow through. These are all things that can help a neurodivergent's brain and nervous system to feel safe. Things that destroy it very quickly, very quickly, is gossip or oversharing disclosures. I've had that experience where someone overshared something and I was shocked and very quickly was like, nope, I cannot trust them. That's how quickly it just can go or be broken, I should say. Weaponizing professionalism, unspoken rules, and moving targets, that clarity and expectations, right? Feedback without clarity, there it is again. And then kind of punishing difference. So, if you know someone really struggles for being late, always calling them out for being late when maybe actually it needs to be something else that another conversation that needs to happen. So those are kind of ways that can quickly destroy things. And some of these are things that you may not even be aware that you've done, but for that person, that neurodivergent brain, it has closed the door and it's going to take a long time to reopen that. So we like to remember God's image, right? We are all made in the image of God. And remembering Imago Dei, can never say that, is that kind of dignity before productivity, belonging as a witness. The body needs every part. Love looks like practical care. And that means those who are made in God's image, we all have different care needs. We all have different parts that we play in the body. We all, have different things. And those who are neurodivergent are no different. The idea that advocacy, um, you know, is part of God's story. Being an advocate is part of God's story. So the advocacy levels, this is something that I've come up with more than anything else. So please don't, I mean, you can share it, please share it, but like you may not find loads about this because I've kind of made it up with the different information I've come up with or kind of studied and examined. So there's the self-advocate. So how can I advocate and lead? So this could be things like how I advocate for myself, how I advocate for my family, how I advocate kind of for maybe one-to-one more coaching advocacy is that self. Then there's the team. What are the team norms, the team meetings, the workflows, the kind of team leader conversations, I would say. And I hope most of these are kind of normal things. Then there's the system advocacy level. So looking at, the system is the onboarding, policies, hiring, that new staff training, things like that. That's kind of the system. And then there's the culture. What are the stories we're telling? What are we rewarding? What are we, shaming unintentionally or intentionally? What is the culture of our ministry, particularly to those who are neurodivergent? And this one is a really hard one, especially if you are not having everyday conversations with people who are neurodivergent and who are, I've had a conversation with someone who was like, oh, I don't know if we have anyone on staff who are neurodivergent. And statistically, you do. 1 in 5 adults are neurodivergent. But I really just, want to think through, even if you don't have someone coming to tell you that they're neurodivergent, um, partly maybe because they don't know. So 1 in 5 are neurodivergent, and that's only those who are diagnosed. So I think it's definitely higher because there's a lot of people who are undiagnosed. But anyways, that's a side side story. But the idea of culture is a lot harder, and it's going to take a lot more to kind of reflect on. But it doesn't mean, we can't change that. I'm all about changing the culture. So my question is, I just want you to take a second to think, where do you have the most influence right now? Where do you have the most influence right now? And I want you to be clear that your answer should be all of these. You have influence on all of these right now. You might have more influence in one area. Yes, you might have a higher influence in one area, but you, as a person, as someone who is part of your ministry, as someone who is part of, just part of your ministry, part of this world, part of your culture, like you have influence all of these different levels. Like I said, it might slightly vary, but it doesn't mean that you don't have influence. And I want you to take a minute and think, what is one thing in these different levels, like that I am passionate about looking at? Okay, I'm not saying you have to change it. I'm not saying that there has to be a change. I just want to know what is one place where you think I'm like passionate about this and I want to look into it. So just write that down. Take a note of that right now. Okay, so the next thing we have previously talked about the responding to disclosure. And this can be again in a kind of formal way or even a non-formal way and how we need to respond to that. So I'm just going to let that sit there. The reason I just want to bring it up is because confidentiality needs to be really carefully defined in these kind of situations. And again, most countries, I think all countries that I'm aware of, please check your own context, but most countries, you do not have to disclose that you are neurodivergent. Obviously, I encourage it because that will help and that will bring clarity from on your side as well as kind of the ministry side, but legally you do not have to disclose that. So, obviously, when someone does disclose, we've talked about before how that's a big thing, but often they're going to disclose in a private way, or often maybe because they are struggling with something and they're wanting help. And so, really talking about confidentiality at the start of this, because that is probably the biggest trust barrier that can be kept so quick, like so easy to keep confidentiality, but is so also easy to break and is probably really hard to overcome. And that's not to say that, if you break confidentiality, if you own up to that, I think it's different. But when it's not, there's like it can cause kind of a lot of trust issues and that again, that safety and feeling safe. And so thinking about confidentiality, that things that you can share with people is first when someone discloses, it's always good to clarify what you want to keep confidential, right? Like that person might be disclosing to you, but they actually can turn around and say, "Oh, actually, I'm happy for you to talk to my team leader," or "I'm happy for you to talk to so and so about it." So first, always clarify what what and who do you want to keep confidential, like what information. And that's, just a quick question. Even if there is help that comes from that conversation, depending on the workflow, depends on if you need to disclose that adjustment or not. And it only needs to be disclosed if it's part of the workflow. So, for example, if someone is like, "Hey, I just need a timer. Could I get a timer from you?" Say your HR. I don't know. I don't know who they would go to, but they're wanting a timer. I need a timer to help me do this. Can I have a timer? HR says yes. They get the timer. You don't need to disclose that to anyone, right? That's not something that needs to be disclosed because that's not affecting anyone else's workflow. That is just for them, their help, and how they can like work better, right? However, if they come to you and like, "Oh, I really would appreciate if my team leader would meet with me for 10 minutes every week," obviously that affects the workflow. So you will need to kind of share that adjustment with the team leader. Now, let's be clear what you need to share. And again, legally, you do not share. Legally, you should, if they've not disclosed to their team leader, you cannot disclose to their team leader that they are neurodivergent. You can disclose to them the kind of um, background is, I guess, the better word is saying. So for this example, you have someone come to you and who's like, "Hey, is it possible that I could just for 6 weeks try out having a 10-minute meeting on a Monday with my line manager?" And you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Bigger conversation than that. That's usually not just that quick of a conversation, but you agree that that's a good thing. You go and they're like, "Hey, it would be really great if you could maybe email, copy me in or something," right? So you go to the team leader and say, "Hey, we're really working on so and so's work-life balance, work adjustments, whatever." And they've asked, "Is it possible for the next 6 weeks to have 10 minutes on a Monday? What time would work for you?" Blah, blah. Okay. This will really help them in their work and being productive for the week. Nowhere did I mention any sort of diagnosis. Um, Nowhere did I mention any sort of label. I just said this would help them. Now, let's be honest, you're probably having these conversations because there's probably a little bit of a um, misexpectation or kind of different experiences anyways. um so it may not be as it might feel a little a bit out of the blue, maybe not, I don't, it depends on the context, but you do not share the exact reason why they're asking for that, the label, the diagnosis. Like, you do not need to share that, and you legally cannot share that unless you have permission from that person. Okay. I don't some of this you might be like, "I don't need to know this," but it is really important because hopefully you are going to start having these kind of conversations, and it's really important to know. I will just say, always check your country's context, your country's laws. They will always be up to date when as I'm recording this, this is what it is, but always check your country. Even if you're in the US, check your state. It is a little different from state to state, but check your place, is what I'm trying to say. So let's talk about celebrating, because it is important that we think about celebrating strengths without tokenizing, right? And we want to celebrate neurodivergent strengths in ministry, not in a way that makes someone feel like the spokesperson or the only one who values them when they're mass, only value them when they're acting a certain way. Um, Now, I will just say I'm happy to be the spokesperson for neurodivergence. I've kind of put myself in that position. I am totally okay with that, but not everyone is. Not everyone wants to be the go-to person for ADHD or autism or fill in the blank. So let's be mindful of that, right? Let's be aware of that. Um, Obviously, there are still people who want to be celebrated, but it might be that you need to celebrate something that others might see as small, but it was a big deal for them. I always say best practice, name the specific contribution, let people opt into it, and value hidden strengths. So that idea of, for example, I noticed you bring clarity and pattern spotting that strengthens our planning. I want to make sure our process supports that. Things like that. Um, that idea that, you know, I think for my life, it's very normal because we're also raising a child who's neurodivergent. And so we see the little wins and we celebrate them big. My son got a Star of a Week award. So every week they pick a student. He'd never gotten one, never gotten one in the last 2 years. Supposedly every child gets one because they do it every week and anyways, my child did not. He got one. What did we do? Well, we did know ahead of time. We were told ahead of time. So I got in cake. I got in balloons. I got in party poppers. I got in noisemakers. Like we went full out. So he came out of school. Obviously, we didn't bring it to school because we didn't want to totally embarrass him. But we he came out with his award. It's just a piece of paper. It says Star of the Week on it. Like for any other kid, oh cool, yay. We came out, we were like clapping, we were like, yeah, buddy. We were like cheering him on. He then comes home and sees these balloons and like we got a big banner and we got all this stuff for him. And we were like, oh my gosh, buddy, Star of the Week. Like we went big. And for some people, that's like, whoa, over the top, right? But we knew how hard he has worked to get that. Not even work, like just to be kind of noticed. Like that's a big deal. He got another award for his maths. Like again, we got cake and candles and we sang this cheesy pie math song. Like we celebrated these little wins because it is so much harder for him to get to those wins than it is for other children. And so when you can name specific things, when you can name even the smallest thing, like can be a big deal for neurodivergent brains. Do I think you need to always get someone a cake and balloons? No, that was like, I'm aware that may have been a little over the top even for us, but the idea is it's something small for some people. It's a big thing for other people, particularly neurodivergent brains. So just wanted to share that. Um, and now I will say we have like set ourselves into the routine of now every time we get Star of the Week, he's gotten it one other time now, so two in total. And he was like, "Where's my balloons?" I was like, "Oh no." But celebrating people is really important, and if you can get into the habit of doing it regularly, it can change. Um, it can change how people work. Obviously, that's not just a neurodivergent thing; that's everyone. But for neurodivergent minds, it also is good to build up trust to kind of bring in that safety as well. So, inclusive policy and hiring. Advocacy includes systems, right? We talked about those levels of systems, and those systems include hiring, onboarding, and policy. I want to be really clear. You do not need to create a neurodivergent policy. That's unhelpful. Because again, especially when you're thinking about hiring, onboarding, and even policies, if they've not disclosed they're neurodivergent, why would you give them a different policy? Does that make sense? So you need to create things that are neurodivergent friendly. So having clear job descriptions and success markers that are clear, that show the expectation, that show clarity, that, demonstrate those things. Interview questions shared ahead of time where possible. Again, you don't know if they're neurodivergent, so do this for everyone. Share the interview questions ahead of time. There was a study done about 18 months ago where, again, these people went in for an interview. Half of them got the questions beforehand and half of them didn't. And everyone who got the questions beforehand were hired. They all went in for different jobs. I should clarify that. It was all different like companies, different jobs, like the idea that they were hired. Again, because They were ready. They were prepared. They could think through the questions. We don't know if they're neurodivergent or not. That wasn't even the study. The point of the study wasn't actually, are they neurodivergent or not? It was just about interview readiness, onboarding, and hiring. Exactly this. And so if we can send the questions ahead of time, and again, in the study, I think they sent them all and then they sent them all again, I think like 2 hours before or something, and people then had to feedback. And a lot of people had all looked at them ahead of time, right? Like they all knew ahead of time. There was one person who looked at like 2 hours ahead. Like, I don't know, that's just an added bonus. But sharing interview questions ahead of time can massively improve the whole interview experience because everyone knows what they're walking into. They know how to, they know what they're going to be asked. They know the outline. You could even send an agenda of the interview process. This is that. And then as well, it's clear timelines. So, it's kind of like saying, okay, deadline, applications close this day, interviews are held around this time, decisions are made at this time, we will be in touch with you at this time. Like, it's the worst when you're just like, I don't know, like they'll call me at some point. My husband's gone for interviews where they're like, oh yeah, we'll call you in the next 2 days, and he's like never gonna call back. So he's like, I'm assuming I didn't get the job, but like that's the worst, right? So thinking through kind of how you can do the interview process. Offer alternative ways to demonstrate skills. Depending on the interview, I recognize in a ministry context, you don't always have to do this. I remember I was a teacher. I had to go and teach a lesson, and they then ask you for feedback and all of that. And that was probably the most terrifying time because you didn't know what you were walking into, like who the kids were. It was literally just a group of kids that you knew the age, but you didn't really know their skill. You didn't know anything. And so, thinking about even in that, if you were to do that kind of situation, telling them, hey, the kids are at this level, this is the age, this is the group, like how many kids, blah, blah, blah. Because I didn't know if I had five, like they usually say 5 to 10 was when I knew it was 5 to 10. So I just brought stuff for 15 because I was like, I don't know. So things like that. Is there ways to demonstrate and it not be a question and answer thing? Could it be, could you do a presentation? Could you bring in your portfolio, things like that. I know ministry is a little bit of a different context, but kind of thinking through the interview process is how you can bring in different things. And it could be even, hey, ahead of time, hey, you got an interview. How would you like to how would you like to demonstrate this skill? Or we'd like to see your I can't think of any skills right now, but we'd like to see your writing, let's say. I've just hired a copywriter. I went through the process of finding someone, and I asked everyone, I said, I want to see, some of your copy that you've written for other clients in my kind of niche. Um, just pull it up on the screen. They didn't need to send it to me or anything. And so, yeah, like kind of different ways how you could do that. So think about that. The other one is the structured onboarding with written expectations. This one is, again, different for every context, but I think back about, so I have a business coach that I work with, and day one, which it's hard to think like it was the onboarding process because you're with a business coach, like you meet, you chat, all these kind of things. But day one, the onboarding process was her giving me a Trello board that had all of these things on it, and it had dates that I had to have these things done by. Now, if you don't know what Trello is, please send me a message. You can also use it in Asana or Airtable or like any of these things work, okay? If you don't know what any of these things are, please come see me and I can share it with you. But it's basically, I don't know how to describe it, but basically what I'm trying to say is the biggest thing that I have loved about this Trello board is that there are things on there, it has dates. I don't look at this long to-do list and think, oh my gosh, I have to get all of these things done right now, because that's how my brain works. I look at a list and I think to myself, I have 10 things and I have to get them all done in the next hour. Right? And so this board said week one and had a list of all the things I need to do in week one. Week two, all the things I need to do in week two. Week three, week four, all these things, right? And it was for 12 weeks. Like that was the best thing. Okay. Handing someone when they sign up, not sign up, when they get, when they sign, I guess I'm going to say sign up to work with you, when they've signed the contract, that's what I'm trying to say. Giving them a bunch of policies to read and say, hey, you need to read these. Like, do they read them? I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if I've ever read all the policies that I've been given. Don't tell anyone in HR that. I've skimmed through them for sure. I've definitely skimmed through them. But like, I don't know if I've like read through them. But can you imagine having a Trello board or some sort of, organizer that said, week one, read this policy. And it's not the whole policy, like I was given like this massive book. That's why I'm like, I don't know if I read it all. It's this massive book. It's like, instead, it's like, read, this policy, and it's a link to it because everything can be online now, right? Think about that kind of idea, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is, think through the onboarding process and think through how can we break this down so that when someone receives all this information, they're not completely overloaded. Because neurodivergent or not, it's going to be a lot of information you're getting, right? And it's going to get lost, and there's a lot of things that are happening. And so if we can create a space where someone can click it, see it, do it, and then what I also love about Trello is you can click the like done button and it does a little tick for you, and I can see I've done it. I'm like, dopamine hit, right? So think about that. I guess that's an example, is to kind of think about how can you structure the onboarding process so that it's written with expectations, but also that there's a way that it doesn't feel so overwhelming that you have to get all this stuff done and it feels like now. But instead it's a, you know, I don't know, however many week process. And I think that's something that this is a total side note. The onboarding process, like I think one thing that I've really appreciated when I have onboarded coaching clients, because I do coaching with moms, and even myself as I have a business coach, like the onboarding process has been weeks. Now, that doesn't mean that the first meeting was all about, like wasn't actually helpful. We had a coaching call. But the first 15 minutes I shared about my vision. I shared about who I was. I shared all these kind of things and how we would work together. We had our coaching call. The next week, I shared a little bit more about my why. Like, why did I start doing this? Kind of all of that. And then our coaching call. And then the final week, because I do a lot of 3-week coaching with moms, I share about kind of how they can work with me next. I talk about my podcast. I talk, like, again, the first 10 minutes of those 3 weeks and the rest of it, it's a 45-minute call. So 35 minutes is all about them. And it just allows them to get to know me and on board with them. Now, you might think, oh, that's a lot of work for 3 weeks. But actually, a lot of them then go on to work with me longer. They go into different ways that I have, like different memberships and things like that. So onboarding does not have to be one day, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Onboarding can be a longer process with smaller bites, and people are probably going to sink it in more. So that's just my own thoughts. And I think we can sometimes feel like onboarding, just if we can all get it done in like 2 days, then they're done. But they're like fire hosed, and they're like, I don't know what to take in. And then they don't take anything in, let alone the little bits. So if we can spread it out, it's better. Let me just say that. The other thing is, I'll get over my soapbox now. The other thing is transparent workload and reporting lines. Always so important. Again, this, if you were to use the Trello board, which I'm now thinking I'm going to have to go make for myself, but that idea of, like the reporting structure, something I really appreciate. I know I'm sure this isn't unusual to other ministries, but Agape, the UK, have like the, I don't know what it's called, but basically it's a reporting structure of like all the different ministries, who's and where, and all that kind of thing. And it's really helpful to look at, and it's really easy to see like who reports to who, especially because I work on projects, and so sometimes I need to go to the person that they report to just to get a better understanding, or things like that. And so having that somewhere that's easy to get is always really helpful. And again, not that you just definitely have to have that, but just something where it's easy to see who reports to who, how that works, all of that kind of thing. The other thing I would just want to say about transparent workload, well, I mean, really all of these, but particularly thinking about transparent workload is not just telling someone something once, but actually a new study's shown that you need to be telling them like 13 to 21 times. That's a lot. It used to be 7. It used to be 7 touch points for someone to actually understand the information you're soaking in. It has now gone to 13 to 21. So it's doubled, stroke tripled. Okay, like that's a lot of touch points. And that can get really tiring. Trust me, it gets really tiring telling people the same information. But it helps them to, I think, for me, I see under transparent workload because telling someone at the interview, Oh, by the way, we do the staff conference every year. You're required to go, no matter what position you are. Just telling them that once, like they don't know what that means. They won't know what that means in the interview. You're telling them information, but like kind of repeating it and like drip feeding more information. What does that mean? How does that work? Like have that be as part of your onboarding, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like just because you said it once and it's somewhere in your policies, like doesn't mean people have actually taken it in because we now have to have 13 to 21 touch points, which is insane to me. But for people to really understand and to take in what they're kind of the information. Okay. So, oh, I've already shared these. Sorry. I didn't realize I Okay. So indie friendly board onboarding ideas. Sorry, I totally just like decided to go for it. But so have that week by week plan. Like I said, that Trello board, having it be clickable. It's going to take a lot of work to set it up. I'm going to just be honest with you, right? But once it's set up, you don't need to really do it or make tweaks, right? You don't need to totally do it. And I will totally help you. I think I'm loving this idea. I love a good Trello board, so I'm all about that. Written role clarity sheet. That's the thing I just kind of talked about. And it can be broken down even more. It just totally works for your context. The how we communicate here guide, right? Like we communicate via and have it broken down. Maybe we've just, we were on Microsoft for a while, so I'm going to use some Microsoft terms. I know we are now Google and Google's the best, but we used to be Teams, channels, all of that, which I guess technically Google sort of has, but they don't. People, right? But being clear, this is the channel we use. In WorkVivo, this is what we put in, or this is what we don't, or things like that. Being really clear and writing it down. And sometimes you might write this stuff or kind of these guides and think, these are adults. Why am I writing this? But I just like to take a minute and point out that, the like, um, this is a really weird example, especially if you don't know what I'm talking about. But the sunshades that go on people's cars, and you will always see on there do not drive with this up or something along those lines, right? Now, the reason they have that is because someone has done that and then got in a car accident, gotten hurt, whatever, and has sued the company because it did not say on there, do not have this up while driving. So I use that example because you would think something that has completely blocked your view, you cannot see out the window because it's blocking the sun. You would think you would need to put those down to drive. And yet there is someone out there who did not think that and drove, obviously I can imagine got in a car accident and then sued the company. And that is why they now have it. You can also Google that. That is a true story. I have I had a professor tell me that and I didn't believe him and I Googled it and it is a true story. And they got a lot of money for it. So just to pretend, just like think through, even when you're writing this and think, why am I writing this? We're all adults. Just remember the person. I assume it was a man. I don't know if it was a man, but and I assume a man just because I don't know. There's no judgment here on bad driving. Just in my mind, men are kind of silly and daring. That's all. Just think of the man who drove with the sunshades up and actually it's like, I think $1 million he got from that lawsuit. Okay, just imagine that. Okay, just remember there are people who need very clear step-by-step instructions, even if they're adults. The other thing is having a buddy system. This is a great one. I know a lot of staff who are new will go through that new staff training and have that kind of system. I know in the UK it's a very intense training, it's a good training. I've partially gone through it myself, and it's very good. And they have a buddy system. But think about that for kind of either even different roles. If you're switching roles or switching on to different things and doing an onboarding kind of thing. It doesn't have to be just new staff who go through that buddy system. So, supporting neurodivergent brains in leadership development. This is a great one because thinking about um, leadership development, I guess, I don't know. I love leadership development. I love developing people. But thinking about leadership development, there's leadership pathways that do not require like constant kind of like either constant touch points, constant kind of, well, it says extroversion. Like there are pathways into leadership that can be the quiet and the calm, um, and the kind of the introverted way, I guess I would say it. There's the mentoring and coaching options that kind of can help people through to grow their leadership. There's the kind of idea of the flexibility in how leadership is expressed, and thinking about, um, I think about how I've led teams in the past, and thinking about how, giving people voices and saying like, there are times when, this person is in charge and I'm like, yep, you're in charge. You go for it. I support you because I'm still your leader, but you are in charge of this, and yep, go for it. Knowing that flexibility is, I guess, kind of sharing that, but being clear about that. I was very clear with them up front, said, you are in charge of this project. I will support you. If I think it's totally wrong, I will obviously get your feedback, and like we'll, have several conversations about it. But you are in charge. Like you make the decisions. The final thing is sustainable rhythms, not burnout, proving by willpower. Do not force anyone into something. If they've said no, honor that. I think I've shared that before. Thinking about, wanting to support growth, wanting to support development, like it might just be slower for them. And that's totally fine because they're taking in a lot more and they might need it. Or it might be they get really intense on it for a while and then you might need to come in and encourage them to finish. My my whole kind of brand is called the unfinished idea for a reason. I have so many ideas that I have started and unfinished that I'm now taking off and doing. So you might just need to encourage them to help do that. In that encouragement, is that forcing them? No, but it's kind of saying like, okay, keep going. Like we got to keep going. We got to keep going. Especially, I mean, there's deadlines. Obviously, you need to hold them to those deadlines if there's deadlines for things. But I'm saying like, it's not like if you don't get it done by tomorrow, you're fired. Like that's not going to help anyone, right? So things like that. Just thinking through how much do I push? How much do I not? How much do we have discussions and things like that about it? Okay, so let's think about some scenarios. And I'm gonna keep talking, but if you want to just pause after I kind of discuss this, then you can think through. So there's kind of 5 different scenarios, and I want you to think through how you could advocate for someone in this scenario. So the first scenario is a leader says we can't accommodate everyone. What could you say or do in this situation? Okay, another situation. Someone makes a joke about ADHD in a meeting. Again, what could you say or do in this situation? A hiring panel wants a culture fit for a vague criteria. Again, what could you do in this situation? A staff member is burning out after events, but is praised for pushing through. What could you do? This is not because of none of these, as much as these all pertain, not, they don't pertain to me, but like they weren't intentional, is what I'm trying to say. And then disclosure was shared too widely. What would you say or do in those situations? You only need to pick one, but I do want you to pause for a second and think through what would you do in one of these situations? How could you advocate in the role that you are in for this situation? So take a minute and pause. So I'm just going to pick a couple. This is just at random. So a leader says, we can't accommodate everyone. If I heard that, I would say, depending on the context of what the leader was saying and when, I would, if it was like a small group of us, I would say, oh, could you explain what you mean by accommodate? I would, want to understand more about what they're saying in this statement. If it was a larger group setting, sorry, if it was a larger group setting, obviously I would want to then make a one-to-one meeting with them and say, hey, I really don't understand this. Could you kind of like help me understand what do you mean by accommodating when you said this? What was your thoughts behind it? And kind of just break down to see where they're coming from. Because a lot of times they'll probably say that and not realize exactly what they were saying, or what they're saying isn't really what match what they meant. But just taking time saying, hey, this, and being honest and saying, oh, it's kind of upset me when I've heard that because I know accommodations actually really help people and can help others to thrive. So I really want to look this with you. Another one, someone makes a joke about ADHD in a meeting. This is also kind of one that earlier about, Um, if someone kind of is using banter at someone's expense, so this would be a good one as well. And again, I would just say, hey, we're a neuroaffirming space. Um, that is for someone who has ADHD. I would say, obviously, I have ADHD. Most people know that. But I would say, like, as someone who has ADHD, I actually find that joke to be really offensive. And I don't know if you meant it that way, but it's really hurt me. Or it's hurt me, or it could hurt me, depending on what the joke would be. Um, and I would, something like that. I would just kind of say, or if, it's about autism or another neurodivergence, I would just say, hey, we're a neuro-affirming space. I appreciate that you're trying to make a joke, but I don't think it's going to land appropriately, and we don't want to create a culture where it can be difficult. So those are just two examples. Think through as well what maybe you would do. Does it match? Would it be something similar? So this week, I want you to think about how you can change one lead. So that idea of, sorry, one change I will lead. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. One change I will lead. I had to read, I was like, wait, hold on a second. So what is one thing that you can bring change to this week? And again, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be big. It could be sending that agenda out ahead of your meeting. It could be, you know, um, sending that follow-up from the meeting to someone. It could be, what is one thing that you're going to go and lead and change? What is a change I will influence? So maybe you may not fully know what that is in this moment, but it's maybe when someone says that ADHD joke, you're going, you know what? I have influence over this. I can say something. And again, it doesn't need to be shame. It doesn't need to be big. If it was in a call, even maybe in a private chat saying, hey, I found that really hard, or, blah, blah, blah. One conversation I will have. What is a conversation that you can have? And it could be even, hey, I have just taken 5 weeks with this crazy lady about neurodiversity, and I want to share it with you. I want to share what I've learned with you. What is a conversation that you can have this week? Because by saying, hey, I want to have a conversation with you, you're not saying, oh, it's because it could be whoever you want. I mean, go to your spouse and say, I want to have this conversation with you. This is what I've learned. It could be with, whoever. It doesn't have to be anyone. The conversation isn't supposed to necessarily be a like, I'm going to bring change conversation. The conversation is just supposed to be, hey, I just want to share with you. Or it could be, hey, I really want to talk about this topic because I want to bring change. Something like that. It can be whatever conversation, but have a conversation about neurodivergent brains this week. The final one is a system I will review. Okay, now I'm aware that you might think, I don't have a system to review. That's an HR thing. I'm not HR. Or that might be, I have too many systems to review. And a review does not mean that you're going to bring change. I'm not asking you to necessarily do that. What I do want you to think through is a system. What is something that you guys regularly do? Maybe it's your team meetings. That's a system. Maybe it's a policy. That's a system. Think through one thing that you want to review. And reviewing it just means, hey, is this actually working for our team? And you'll know if it's working for your team or not because it's working or not, right? Like you can see, yes, this is working, or no, actually, we're finding that so and so is always late, or so and so is really struggling with this, or, things like that. And so think of a system that you can just review this week and take notes of it. Take notes what you see, the good, the bad, the joyful, the sad. Think through all of those things. I want to just end. So that's this week. And I want to encourage you to really think through how you, in those kind of levels, how we all have, a level of advocacy for ourselves, for our team, for our kind of systems, and for our culture, within our ministry, within our families, within our cities, within our countries. Like we all have those different levels. And I really want to encourage you with this final story, which was kind of a weird moment for me. But I wear a lot of clothes. I'm currently not wearing any one, but I have a lot of t-shirts. I have 10 actually. I did a campaign, 10 days of neuroaffirming clothes, that all shared something on it about being neurodivergent, supporting people who are neurodivergent, or even just saying advocate. And I wore it in October for Invisible Disabilities Week. For 10 days, I wore a neuroaffirming shirt. And I just like as I would every day, right? And what was also really fun was I got to then support neurodivergent companies by ordering all these different shirts. So that was also very fun. But that was in October. I have worn them since. I wear them. They're just really comfy t-shirts. I'm not gonna lie. They're the softest t-shirts ever. Highly recommend. But they're the best. Anyways, a couple weeks ago, I was on the playground and waiting for my son to come out of school, and one of the teachers came up to me, a teacher I've never met. Now, I am part of the PTA. I am the PTA at our school. I've kind of started it and kind of do it. I'm at school a lot. I do a lot of things with the school. But I'll be honest, I don't know all the teachers because they're in class, right? Like I'm usually there doing other things and all that. But um, this teacher came up to me and said, "Hey, are you the neurodiversity lady?" And I said, I think so. Like, what do you mean? Like, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, where is this going? And basically, she has a parent who is kind of just going through the diagnosis process, kind of struggling, is obviously working with the school and trying to get her daughter support. But it was recommended that I would meet up with her. And I was really honored. I was like, I'll take that. I'll take that badge. I will be the neurodiversity lady. And she said, oh, I thought it was you because of the shirts you wear. Now I was like, oh, I was like, oh, and I had to think for a second, like that shirts I wear, like, just wearing a normal shirt. And then I realized that yes, because I wear t-shirts that say neuroaffirming, that are neuroaffirming. It doesn't say neuroaffirming. It just says one. I have one that says literally says autism advocate. That's literally all it says. It's really cute design. Another one says I vibe with inclusion. Another one that says ADHD doesn't come with a manual, it just comes with a really tough mom. Things like that. Like I just wear they're really cute. I will get you one if you want one. But what I'm trying to say is I advocated, I showed that I was neuroaffirming. I advocated by the t-shirt I wore. I didn't say a thing. I didn't say, yes, the Cinco. I work closely with the Cinco. I see her probably on a weekly basis. And the Cinco is the person who helps get children with additional needs the support. I should clarify that. All of that. But really, it was by what I wore. And I just want to encourage you with this story that you can advocate by what you wear. And I'm going to be honest with you, I did not plan this, but I will do it. If you message me and say you want an advocate shirt. So I have a t-shirt that literally just says advocate across it. It is from a brand all about autism. So they hire autistic individuals, often who have what they class as severe or level 3 autism. So not able to get a job in a neurotypical world, but in a place that they can still contribute. And so I love that. That's a side note, but I will get you a t-shirt. If you message me and say, I would like an advocate t-shirt, I will get it for you. I'll order it and I'll have it sent to your house free of charge because it will be amazing when you wear that shirt who comes to you. Because I have seen it with this teacher. I have seen it with another mom that happened a few months prior. I've seen it online when I've worn these t-shirts online. People are like, wow, okay, like she is safe. She feels safe that I can go and tell her these things. And I've had parents tell me things that some of it is because I'm a person online. I think that helps, you know, but I've created a safety because of what I wore. And so I just really want to encourage you, if you think through, one change you will lead, one change you will influence, one conversation you will have, and one system you'll review. If that feels too much for you, wear a t-shirt. Wear a t-shirt that says advocate. Wear a t-shirt that says I vibe with inclusion. Wear a t-shirt that says autism rocks. Things like that. There's so many shirts out there that you could wear. Doesn't mean you have it, doesn't mean you're diagnosed with that. It just means you're a safe place. And I really just want to encourage you to think through that, how you can be a safe place without even the words, right? So if you would like a t-shirt, please message me and I will get you one. It would be such an honor to do that for you. So that is session 5. I appreciate you guys so much for being here, for being a part of the last few weeks. Please make sure to sign up for a one-to-one. I've had a few already come through. So please sign up for a one-to-one. I would love to meet with you and hear about your context, hear about how, we can bring that little change to someone. It might be little for us, but be life-changing for them, and how we can do that in your context. So I hope you all have a great week, and I will speak to you all very soon.